Well, good morning, everybody. How are we doing today? We are starting off with a bang here. We got our FXCAD 2022, and it's the only thing about FXCAD is unfortunately it takes a little bit to wrap your brain around it because it's slightly unique. Everybody knows what AutoCAD is, but there's a division of Autodesk called OEM, Original Equipment Manufacturer, and they are able to license the AutoCAD engine to be used by software companies like ours to be able to offer that AutoCAD engine. And part of that contract, of course, it can't still be called AutoCAD, understandably, because that's a registered trademark. So we're able to brand it as FXCAD, but unlike a lot of the other ones, we want it to still look and feel identical to AutoCAD. So we don't want it to look like, we're doing some wildly unique thing like some of the other vendors do. They do very specialty little integrations with theirs. Ours is more of this just drop in AutoCAD replacement that's sold and supported by us. And that's the key thing. But, if you're new to it, this webinar is going to be perfect to really explain it to you and show it to you. And it's just that one little mental leap that you have to make. It's just ever so slightly different than an actual stock version of AutoCAD. But you will hopefully notice it is way better than that. We are recording this, so you'll be able to watch this again if you have to step out for a second. And we do want your feedback. We are here live, so there's a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, questions and answers. I'd even recommend clicking it right now. You can get that little window situated so that it'll be a little quicker for you to type in a question when you think of one. But also, you're going to be able to see the answers that we type to other people's questions. So it just makes a great little companion while you're watching this live with us. So that's enough of my rambling. I'm going to get this handed over to Amanda to take us away.
Thanks, Jer. Hi, and thank you all for joining us today. My name is Amanda Marin, and I get the pleasure of showcasing everything we've been working on for this 2022 version of FXCAD. So I can say today that this is going to be available on July 6th. So if you're watching this live, of course, mark your calendar. We're going to be reviewing a little bit about what FXCAD is today. Jer went over a brief discussion of it. We're going to be diving into a bit more detail to explain it all. We're also going to be covering some of the pricing and then a lot about what's new this year for 2022. But first, for those who haven't used FXCAD before, I want to highlight the #1 reason those who start with it stick with it, and that is our support team. Seriously, each and every person here is instrumental every year with putting it together. Mike Bennett up here, he makes sure the installer is seamless for you guys. Paul with the slick graphics. We've got Forrest over here with the website and helping out with the ribbon interface. Jer, of course, instrumental in helping, like putting everything together with all of us. And then everybody here, we've got Brian and Megan and Jake, and all of us helping to test it, making sure it is ready for you so that you can be confident when you install it that you're not going to hit that hiccup of like that new software hiccup. We want it to be seamless for you. Not pictured here, of course, is our sales team and Jason on the documentation, because it is a huge team effort to customize this each year so that you don't have to in your office. But we're also here as the team that helps you with your CAD technical support too. Of course, LandFX pairs with FXCAD. They are two different softwares working together. So of course, if you're running FXCAD, we are going to help you out with your AutoCAD questions too, not just the land effects questions. If you've ever called or emailed us about a land effects question, you know how helpful we strive to be. And if you've ever looked up one of the regular AutoCAD documentation, like some of the regular AutoCAD documentation pages, you know how confusing that can sometimes be. So we're here to help. And this is the #1 reason for using FXCAD. And frankly, it always will be. But here's the outline of all the other reasons that we're going to be covering today, including why it's worth it to upgrade to 2022 if you're currently running FXCAD 2021. The last 30 minutes will all be in FXCAD 2022, showing off the new features. Great. So moving along, here is our yearly reminder of the versions that we support. So we always support the latest 5 versions of FXCAD and AutoCAD. So Land Effects will install on the latest 5 versions. But we don't drop the 6th version right away. We wait until the end of the year. So if you have FXCAD or AutoCAD 2017, remember, you need to upgrade to something newer by New Year's Eve this year. So when that ball drops, so does support for 2017. This is, of course, a necessary thing so that we can evolve land effects with AutoCAD. It allows us to utilize some of the new features that aren't supported in old versions. So let's kind of dive into the rest of this. If you haven't jumped on board with the last 9 FXCADs, you might be wondering what it is. So going through this list, very importantly, it is AutoCAD. Like Jer said at the very beginning, it is AutoCAD. We take AutoCAD, work with their licensing team, and custom strip it down to the basics of what a landscape or irrigation designer or detail drafter would need. Land Effects is still an add-on for FXCAD. They are 2 separate softwares, like I mentioned before, but work together and need each other to function. It's not like AutoCAD LT in that it is like AutoCAD LT in that it can't run any other add-ons, but it actually includes a lot of commands that LT doesn't, that are in full AutoCAD. So it's kind of somewhere in between those two, in between LT and full AutoCAD. Again, right in here, there's that point that it is supported by us. Also, I wanted to highlight in here that it is PC only. You will see, though, that I myself am on a Mac. I run it through Parallels. So you can run it on a Mac. You just need to run it through a virtual machine. So you're probably wondering, but what are the actual full differences between full AutoCAD and FXCAD? We want to make sure that for those going with FXCAD, that you are choosing the right software for your needs. We're providing this, but we want to make sure it's a good fit for you. So we want to be totally upfront and transparent about what it can and what it can't do. So let's go through the list. Of course, it can't run any additional AutoLisp scripts or other add-ons. I've kind of listed out a few here that might ring a bell. So if those are very, very important to you, just keep that in mind that FXCAD cannot run it. However, if there is something on this list that is important to you that we might not have considered before, you could always reach out to us and kind of ask about it. Maybe it's something we want to consider in terms of creating a new tool for land effects to have it on the CAN list. This is crossed out. We'll cover it in a second, but I did want to make a note that it can't kind of bring in an image and put it in the right location. That's actually not a feature that AutoCAD can do either. That's only an AutoCAD survey, AutoCAD maps, and AutoCAD civil. So that's why it's not included in FXCAD. Also, we've stripped out the rendering, lighting, and 3D in FXCAD, and the reason we don't have those is because we do have that SketchUp connection instead. That's where we, everybody for the landscape side especially, goes over for 3D and rendering. It does not have an AutoCAD 360 connection. And that's because a lot of these items right here do require an actual AutoCAD subscription, and Land Effect or FXCAD is still a perpetual license, so it doesn't include that subscription. So it's actually a pro that this isn't on the list because it gives you that perpetual license. It cannot run without a Land Effects license that is active, and that's very important to understand. And it cannot be installed for more than one person per license. Also, very, very important thing to understand about the end user license agreement for this. Let's move on to the can list. So obviously it can open, and it's AutoCAD, so it opens DWGs, it saves DWGs, but it also does those DXF and DGN license types. You can insert images, PNGs, JPEGs. You can import PDFs. You can geolocate plans. And this is new, and we're going to be covering it today. You can actually access live maps. So this is new for 2022. There was a method to kind of do it very manually. You had to jump through a few hoops in the previous versions, but now it's just there. We've set it all up, and I'm going to go through how you can access live maps in FXCAD 2022 very easily. Yes, you can view Civil 3D and anything with that that proxy information, those proxy objects in FXCAD. You don't need to install any additional object enabler or anything. You can see the objects, and if we have time at the end, I will show that to you as well. You are going to have pretty much any AutoCAD command you regularly use. We've been running this obviously for all of those versions. We've gotten a lot of feedback on what commands people want to see in FXCAD, so it's pretty set, and you can be pretty confident in it now based on previous use. We have that command line autocomplete, yes to sheet set manager. We have that SketchUp connection to cover the 3D. Yes, you can customize the interface and the ribbons, and we actually have a whole webinar on it and a power tip if you want to learn how to do that. So you can take what we do and go even further with it. Plus, you can import and export any of those customizations between versions. And of course, I just want to drill it in, that tech support through us. So part of like the three things of the reasons why people go with FXCAD, or one would be obviously the cost, two, it's perpetual license, and three is that it's a much more slimmer AutoCAD in general. So let's go through the cost comparison so you can understand that. I've been kind of saying it through this, that FXCAD is a perpetual license versus AutoCAD, which is a subscription. We were able to keep FXCAD as a perpetual license this year. Not sure about next year going forward, but at least you know this year FXCAD 2022 is a perpetual license, which means it has optional upgrades. So with the subscription for AutoCAD, you do have to pay that annual cost every year. They do have a 3-year plan, but just for the purposes of cost comparison, we went with the annual cost versus FXCAD. So FXCAD has that initial purchase and then an optional upgrades each year. So what that means is that at you purchase it today, next year comes around June 18, 2022, and you can either upgrade it to FXCAD 2023 at that point if it's out, or you can skip that $500 cost and keep going with FXCAD 2022. If you are just going from 2022 to 2023, for instance, or 2021 to 2022, that is $500 to do that upgrade. And if you're doing 2 to 5 years, so something like 2020 to 2022, that's $995. But also 2017 to 2022 is also $995. So that's you've got some options here to work with the budget of your office. Obviously, we recommend upgrading each year. It really helps keep you up. Well, I have a list coming up, so we're going to go through the pros of upgrading each year. But then, of course, on top of that, just remember, Land Effects is a separate license. It's a separate software entirely. So on top of that is your Land Effects renewal or support, depending on if you have a planting FX license, an irrigation FX license, or a design FX license. But those costs are the same between both FXCAD and AutoCAD. So what does that mean? Let's look at what that means over a 5-year. You have your options with FXCAD and you have your yearly subscription with AutoCAD. This, of course, is if you upgrade each year to each new perpetual license of FXCAD. That's the total you're going to look at after 5 years versus AutoCAD. So obviously, big difference there. That can mean a huge that's a really big difference for your office budget over the course of 5 years. Of course, if you want to not be on the latest version each year and getting all those benefits of the latest version, you can skip the upgrades and do that $995 upgrade at any point in here, year 3, year 4, year 5. But if you wait till year 5, this is the lowest price that you would be looking at for your budgeting purposes. So who should kind of switch to FXCAD from AutoCAD? I would say that if you are a regular user of Land Effects and you're definitely going to be maintaining your Land Effects license long term, this is a very good option for you to consider. It's really great for especially sole practitioners, small firms who are looking to use Land Effects, but might have used AutoCAD LT before, and of course Land Effects can't install on LT. So if you don't normally use add-ons, then this is probably a really good budget-friendly cost. And speaking of that, if you want to reduce costs, this is something to consider. So for instance, I worked in a firm before where we actually did a balance of some users had FXCAD and the users who could use, for instance, the Civil tools in Civil 3D, they had Civil 3D licenses. So you can have some licenses of Civil 3D with some people, some licenses of just full AutoCAD with some people, and FXCAD for everybody else who doesn't need those tools in full AutoCAD or Civil 3D. So it gives you an option for reducing your costs in your firm. If you prefer that perpetual license, this is a really good option for you to consider. And if you want to stay up to date with those reduced costs, and also knowing that we only released that FXCAD, this FXCAD 2022, when we've tested it extensively and know that it's ready for you. So kind of we're almost your CAD manager at that point, giving you the go ahead to go and install the latest version of AutoCAD with FXCAD. So if you, and also finally, again, if you've experienced the difference in support and you're looking to have us be there for you and your team when you have AutoCAD questions like, oh, I'm having problems with this XREF, or I'm having problems with text or something really simple, that we're here for you. Okay, so let's go on to a few more of the differences. Starting with the installation process. So we make sure to not just strip down the actual interface to what you need, but also the installation of FXCAD. So I'm kind of going through a little storyboard here between the two installations. We start up, we're installing, we're asking where to install things. We are putting in, this is where in 2022, the installation process is a little bit different for both AutoCAD and FXCAD. You will find this out when you go to install it, but I kind of wanted to give you a preview right now. So we tried, FXCAD has a few more steps as you go along, but mostly it's trying to make sure that it is ready for you to connect more seamlessly with your LandFX license. So there's a few more windows that are going to pop up for the FXCAD installation, but it's all about seamlessly connecting to your LandFX license. You can see over here, I've unchecked AutoCAD Performance Reporting Tool, and I just click install, and it seems to like it's just going to go. But actually, it's hiding a few things, as we'll see a little bit later. I'm foreshadowing. Oh, great, it installed. It just installed AutoCAD 22 over here, or so it seems. And if in FXCAD, we're going through and we're installing everything, and there is a slight change in here. I do recommend going through our documentation on just how the trial, installing with the trial of FXCAD 2022 versus activating it. That's changing this year. So keep that in mind as you're once you get the new FXCAD 2022, that's coming, and review our documentation to get the latest steps. I think we're still fine tuning this. But at the end of the day, AutoCAD told us that's all it installed, but it actually installed all of this. Whereas FXCAD, this year we do need some of those Autodesk desktop app and Genuist service, as well as FXCAD 2022, but it did actually install quite a bit less that runs in the background. So you might also be here as somebody who's trying to figure out, is it worth it? Is it worth it to upgrade to 2022? And of course, I always say yes, but I always come with my reasons, right? We're going to go through all of the features that we just try and make it worth it for you to do this. And I always like to keep current myself. But here are some of the main reasons that you should go through when considering if you should upgrade kind of as an office. And some of the benefits of upgrading each and every year, always remaining current, you have it's easier to adjust to the updates and the changes. I talk to people quite often who have jumped for 5 years, from say 2017 all the way up to 2022, or last year it was people coming from 2016 all the way up to 2021. And even though there's a few key new features every year, if you stack all of those new features together over the course of 5-6 years, it's a little jarring to go to the latest version. So by keeping current all the way along, it's a lot easier for somebody to adjust to the latest version. There's only a few new things to learn, as opposed to 20 new things to learn, and everything's different and it's all at once and it's overwhelming. I find this is just better for users in general. There's very little transition time between versions. You are going to make sure that you are always up to date. Somebody back in version 2017 right now is still dealing with the 2018 save version and having to not being able to open up 2018 files. So there's no new version number yet, but that might be coming along later. Who knows? But it's just really good. It's a good idea to keep updated for that reason. It's easier on the budget. It might cost a little bit more, but it's easier to plan for that budget if you know it's going to be $500 each and every year. You get those new features, as well as you can make sure that you and anybody on your team, if you're looking at our tech support documentation and videos, the versions will match. And so anybody watching a live webinar like today on your team will be able to follow along a lot easier.
Although, I have maybe the slightest little counterpoint.
Okay, okay, I'm game.
Which would be, I totally understand every year is a little tough. And
Mhm.
so there really is nothing wrong with doing every other year just because. But
Okay,
the other thing I would just throw out is you want your computer to be fresh. And so, that just comes into the equation as well. And, that's another thing we encourage is, making sure your computer is really no more than about 3 years old. And so if you're perhaps doing, say, a 2-year lease on your computers, if you're replacing your computers every 2 years, I would say in that case, just leave that one FX CAD version on there, and then in 2 years you replace the computer and the FX CAD version. Um, so just definitely considering that, particularly because when you are looking at upgrading FX CAD, typically it will require a little bit more horsepower than the version you're coming from, which was maybe 2 or 3 years old. And so you're also just countering the hardware costs. So that's just something to say there. But yeah, the beauty is with the pricing with perpetual license, you can do either. You don't have to upgrade every year. If you want to do it over 2 or 3 years, honestly, that's fine. I just
mhm.
definitely would not recommend going to 4 or 5 years, even though we allow it. I would not recommend it. That's getting a little too, like you said, that's getting a little too far. But I think it's almost like the 1 year, 1 year and 3 year are there. But I would say 2 years maybe a little more desirable, just so it doesn't feel like every year you're having to upgrade. Just my
That's
2 cents.
yeah, okay, yeah. You save that time in the installation time. You don't have to install the new version. Yep, there's definite pros and cons. I would agree, and then also say that I think 2 years would be my max in comfort level on that. Like if I were a CAD manager of an
Same
office.
here, same here.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you start to hit 3, it's, especially, if you have to bring a new person on, then they have a version which is 3 years newer than so, lots of considerations across the board. But anyway, so yeah, we will keep going.
Yeah, yeah. No, and oh, that made me think of like if you're hiring students as well, they're probably on one of the latest 2 to 3 versions. So it might be jarring for them to go backwards.
Exactly, there's that too.
Okay, so like he was saying, it kind of, if you get that regular one every 1 year, every 2 years, it's you can kind of still budget for it. Instead of 500 each year, it'd be 995 every 2 years. And then it would also help encourage you to keep up with your computer maintenance, because an old computer won't necessarily run a very new version of FX CAD, and you kind of want them to go together hand in hand. Okay, let's jump into what's new for 2022. We got some new tools that we're going to go through, as well as we improved the AutoCAD ribbon. This year, just some minor tweaks. We're going to go over them. And of course, every year we ask if you ever have any recommendations on improvements to the ribbon that we customize in FX CAD. I'm open to hearing about it, as well as any shortcuts you think would be cool to add to the acad.pgp file, any of that. We always want to improve it, so we're open to suggestions, but I'll show off what we did for this year. But really, really cool things that we want to show off. So floating windows. So you can have, well, I'll show it. But count palette is really awesome. We're going to be going through live maps I've been hinting at. So we're going to show that. What I can't show is multi-core support. So you get, FX CAD 2022, it has kind of the regular performance boosts in terms of running it. But what it also has now is if you have hardware with that multi-core, it will give it a little bit of performance boost. It will use all the cores. So that has been long anticipated, and now it's finally here. So you can make the most of what you have. Okay, let's jump into it. We're going to go over here to FX CAD 2022. I have it installed. We've got a nice little icon. It's different than last year, so you can tell what version you're on. We always make it different. The start screen is a little bit cleaned up. You can see some of my recent files, and I can view these as a list as well as previews like this. My templates have moved. So if I drop this down, I can browse my templates over here. It used to be in the middle over here. And you can, so this kind of area has changed. But let's go into a drawing. So it looks pretty much exactly the same as it normally does. All the interface, very, very similar. Let's go through. The first thing I wanted to show off was those floating tabs. So you were always able to kind of pull these down before, but they look a little bit different now. And what is actually different is that this window, if I resize it, it's no longer actually tied to this open window of FX CAD anymore. So what that means is that I can pull this down, I can pull this down, and we can resize them, and we can kind of work on them side by side. Obviously, this is the XREF. This is the XREF that's in here for my work areas. So I can kind of work on them side by side, but also I can't show it today because I'm in the middle of a presentation. I can only show the one screen, but you can actually grab this and throw it off onto another monitor. It's still tied to this instance of FX CAD that is open, but I can grab this window and move it off on another monitor, which is a really, really cool feature when you think about it. You could never really do that. People were trying to resize like their whole FX CAD or AutoCAD window to span 2 monitors. But what would actually happen, most of the time people would actually go down here, right click and like open up a whole other instance of FX CAD. And that actually ran up twice the processing power on your computer because you're running 2 FX CAD simultaneously. It was actually 2 open programs, so you're really running up running the hardware on your computer pretty hard that way to have them on 2 different monitors. Now it's all in one instance. It's just one FX CAD running in your task manager. So the only hardware pushing you're doing is how many drawings you have open. So that's a really, really handy tool to have. Makes it easier to work here in between 2 drawings that might be XREF together simultaneously. So I can just grab these and pop them back up in here. There we go. They're back up. And the next thing I want to go over while we're in here are the ribbons, the slight changes that we did to the ribbons. So let's have a look. So this is our FX CAD customized home ribbon. If you've been with us, we've been customizing them since I think 2015 or 2016. And we've been tweaking them every year. So one thing we tweaked based on popular demand, last year we added this super lay ISO into the ribbon, which is it is an isolate tool, a land effects isolate tool that fixes some problems with the AutoCAD isolate tool, particularly isolating blocks and that sort of thing. But what it can't do, it doesn't use the AutoCAD uniso tool to unisolate everything. It actually uses layer previous to unisolate. So we moved layer previous over here next to this tool just to make it a lot easier. They're also both here on the quick access toolbar. We've got isolate and we've got layer previous down on the quick access toolbar. We also, speaking of the quick access toolbar, added down here, we added X layer. So this is a tool that allows me to click, if you haven't used it before. This is a layer in an XREF. I click it, it gives me information about that layer. I can even change the XREF layer color to something completely different on a whim like that, and it's actually changing it over here in the layer properties manager for that XREF layer, which is really, really handy. It'll do things in the current drawing, it'll do things in XREFs. Give it a shot. It also allows you to see what each layer is if you're trying to identify things. But it was so handy. It was a new tool, I think last year, so handy that we added it to the quick access toolbar. I also added over here the copy with base point. It's just a regular AutoCAD tool, but it's so handy that I felt it was, well, we all felt it needed to be in a nice, easily accessible spot so that you don't have to keep going here back to the home ribbon while you're drafting with planting or irrigation or your details, and have to go to it over here in the home ribbon. X layer is also here in the home ribbon. So those are some of the little tweaks to the home ribbon and quick access toolbar. Again, if you have any recommendations on other things that should be in here, obviously it's getting a little bit full, so we're, maybe one, maybe two more, we'll see. But basically throughout the whole year, as I'm working on, or Paul or Jake are working on power tips or webinars, a lot of the time we actually have to draft out a plan like you see right here in order to show off the tool that we're trying to train people on. So I end up drafting out entire plans like this. And while we're doing that, we're thinking about, okay, what tools, regular AutoCAD tools or Landifix tools am I using like all the time in order to create this plan? And is it on the ribbon that I'm on when I'm drafting it? And if it isn't, I usually consider if it might be a good idea to add it to the quick access toolbar or give it a shortcut or something like that. So that's how these things happen. We're always keeping it mindful of what might improve your experience with land effects or AutoCAD drafting in general on a daily basis. And that's what we try and do with FX CAD improvements. We also added snap to underlays, added that in here, added in some data extraction and hyperlinks. We also, if we go over to view, added in design center over here, just things that felt people were using on a regular basis and talking to us in tech support tickets about. And so I thought, you know what, why it should not be hidden behind a command line command. It should be up here in the ribbon, easy to find in case we ever need to direct somebody to it. But one feature that is actually new in here that is added into the view ribbon is this count palette right here. So if I click on this, it actually opens up a brand new palette. You definitely haven't seen this before in FX CAD. And what it's doing, I like to think of it as this really, really cool companion to the land effects tools. So you guys know with the land effects tools, all of these, I'm doing this for plants, but this is the same case for our reference notes here in the FX site ribbon and the irrigation items in the FX irrigation ribbon. But here in the planting side, you guys know that you can say highlight and kind of highlight all of one plant. And let's see. And this one, I want that one. I'm just going to open up that. There we go. You know that you can highlight and it will highlight all of the plants. In this case, I have plants inside a work area, so it's highlighting all of those plants. And then you can run plant labels in order to get the quantity, all of those, and run a plant schedule to break them all out, maybe even by work area. But this is a really great companion tool to be able to find items on your drawing. So if I, for instance, click on one of these, it will actually also highlight all of the instances of that block name in here. So it's kind of, it is ignoring the land effects data in this case, but it's giving you a different kind of power in terms of just being able to highlight all of them that are using this block name. And you can see it's also highlighting the block in the plant schedule as well in this case. So keep that in mind with these counts. These counts are live counts. So for instance, if I grab, say, one of these and I go in here and I grab that block and I delete it, that instantly brings that number down to 10, which is the block in the schedule plus 9 over here. But you can also see something else that it's doing. It's throwing up this little warning message, and that means that there is a problem that it's detecting with that block. So if I click on this one, you can see a little red highlighted one down there. So if I click on the actual yellow icon, I can see that it's giving me an error, and that error is that it feels that that is an overlapping object. So if I click on that, it zooms right down into it. I can select it, and maybe I move this one off to the side, and you can see there were two, one on top of each other, and they just turned green because they're no longer overlapping. And we fixed that issue. I can delete this extra one and we're good to go. So great companion tool with your land effects, planting tools, irrigation, and site tools to be able to find those overlapping. There are, if I go back to the list, there are some other things it's telling me. There's also a message for if there's a exploded block. I think if I grab, let's grab one of these. Yeah, it's that one. If I grab that block and I actually explode it, normally, before it was, sometimes they'll pick it up. They're still improving this item. I've been actually talking with Autodesk a little bit about some improvements to, say, the overlapping symbol and the exploded symbol. Sometimes it will actually mention, hey, I noticed there's some line work in here that matches the definition of a block, but it looks like it's exploded. So it will highlight all of that information for you normally. Just won't do it live for me right now. So with all of that, let's see, did I cover everything in the count palette I wanted to? No, I didn't. There was more. There's more in the count palette. So we show deleting things. It shows the real-time count updates. But what you can also do in here is, if I go back to that shrub and I right click it, we have some additional options in here. So let's have a look at that. So I can actually expand this count of 762 by layer. So I can see in this case, in this example drawing, I have a bunch of work areas. And what I've actually done in these work areas is I have, this is an old drawing, I'm just noticing, so it has the old work areas. But I had applied a layer suffix to this. And so when I place plants in those work areas, it will put that layer suffix onto the LP-shrub layer. And it will actually put those plants on that layer. So in here in the count, I can easily see that there's 219 on this layer over here and 265 on this layer over here. So really easy to kind of keep track of those. And those are live too if I go in and start deleting things or adding things. For scale and mirror state, I would say scale would only really help in terms of if you're using generic plants, because land effects already accounts for all the scale in here. Mirror state also doesn't matter for land effects plants. But one other thing that is really cool in here is this insert count field. So I can click on that and I can place that down, and that's actually a live count field. I'm going to click the check mark just to get out of that review state. And if I select that, it's just an M text, and inside is a field item. So that is also a live count. So if I go in here and start deleting things, and then for these fields, I do have to regenerate the plan, and that will update. We also have this item over here creates a table. I'm just going to select and make a table of live fields of all of that type of block and insert it. And these are also live. So very interesting companion tools for you to decide how you might integrate those into your workflow to just make life easier day to day and be able to find and tackle and delete errors. So that's it for the count palette. That was a lot, but I'm going to close that for now. And one of the other things I wanted to get to before questions, definitely if you have any questions, start typing those into the Q&A box down at the bottom. You can find a link to that, and we'll have lots of time to cover it. But one thing I wanted to show off was live maps. So I've been hinting at that a lot. I'm going here to a blank drawing. I've already set the units to decimal feet in this case. I'm going to go to Insert. We're going to go to From Map, and it's going to ask us to sign into Autodesk. And so if you haven't done this before, you can create an account and link it to your email. I've linked it to my email. So you type your email in here after you create an account. And it's going to pull up this map. When you first pull it up, there'll be some windows where it's going to ask you, do you want to use live maps? And you're going to say positive things to all those things. You're going to say yes. But for instance, I can now search an address, 3165 Broad Street. That's where our office is in San Luis Obispo. That's going to pull that up. I can drop a marker right there, and I can click next. In the next page, it's going to ask me for a coordinate system. It's pulling up the list from the internet, but it's going to organize this list with the closest coordinate system at the top. Of course, if you're working with a team, and this is the reason why you're geographically locating your plan, you should talk to your team leader or your surveyor on which coordinate system they used so that you're matching. That's important. For this case, I'm just going to pick the one at the top so it has the least distortion. Make sure your drawing units are correct, and I'm going to click next. I'm going to accept a point, a location of 0, 0, 0 in this case, so I'm right clicking, and I'm going to accept the default angle of 90 degrees, so I'm right clicking to accept that. And we'll wait for it to load, and there is our whole map. Of course, we don't want so much map when we're working, right? That's a lot. You can already see it's kind of loading. One thing I can do is I can go up here. I now have this geolocation geolocation context ribbon, I can go in and capture an area. So I can use that, or I can capture a viewport. I'll just capture a viewport. It snaps it. If I zoom out, you can see the little outline of what it captured at the edges of this view. But now I can go ahead and on my aerial, I can turn the map off. And I just have this. This is if I select it and look at the properties, it's a geomap image. And I can start drafting on top of it. I can change the aerial to have roads in it. Look at that. Isn't that cool? I really like that. So definitely try it out. That's exciting. So some other things that we can go over is opening up a civil drawing just to prove that I can and I can see the items, and also a reminder that you can export and import your preferences for if you make any changes in the ribbon or anything like that. But let's first see if there's any questions that we can get to within the hour, and then we'll see if we have time to show those.
Sure. We got a great question from Brian on the geolocate maps. Are those as up to date as Google Earth? He asks. And yeah, that's right. So they are still using Bing. So I'm not sure where Bing stands in terms of comparison to Google Earth. Of course, Google Earth is pretty full featured and lets you, it's nice to get the chronology setting. You can get the different, views from different times. And so that's definitely a preferred workflow for a lot of cases. But I think that Bing Maps, I think they all, both Google and Microsoft, just buy the map data from these same providers. So it's probably basically the same. But I don't. Do you have anything further on that, Amanda?
No, I would say it is a good idea to shop around like that and not just rely on one aerial image provider, because you might get, like, obviously this is a little grainy for my purposes. I might be able to find something a little clearer on another map, aerial map provider. But one thing you can use this for is you can actually geolocate this image and then bring in another aerial and scale and rotate it and locate it to match that geolocation of this image. So you can use this in your workflow, maybe just as a temporary step in that case.
And that's all the questions for now.
Okay, we have a little bit of time, so I'll just show off those other features and give people some more time to throw some more questions in here to stump Jer or I. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to go and open. I have prepared a civil drawing over here that I've created. It has all of those civil surfaces and contours and spot elevations in here, and they're all proxy objects. So I literally installed this yesterday. I didn't install anything other than FXCAD 2022 in here, no object enablers or anything like that. And I'm just opening this up and I can see all of the information. It's telling me about the proxies. It's telling me that there's proxies in here. And of course, I'm expecting there to be proxies in here. So I do want to show them. But I'm going to ignore the references for now. Great. But you can see everything. In this particular drawing, I hadn't turned off this triangular tin surface. So that's also showing, you can see that's a proxy entity. These lines, that's a feature line in civil, that's a proxy entity, that's a proxy entity, that's a proxy entity. They're all proxy entities. They're not polylines or anything. And I can see them, no problem in here. Of course, if I'm not in an engineering firm, this drawing is a lot larger than it needs to be for me. So I can go ahead and start exploding things in here and actually turning them into regular AutoCAD objects. So it's easier for me to work with. But I can do that here in FXCAD. Also, if you wanted to work with your settings and import and export them, what you're going to do is go into the Start menu and go down to this FXCAD 2022. I'm in Windows 10, by the way. This FXCAD 2022 folder, and you can see all of your options for importing and exporting settings, migrating, resetting to the defaults if you've realized that you've messed it up quite a bit. You can do all of that in here. And this is going to be integral into the process of activating your FXCAD as well. So keep that in mind. We're still kind of fine tuning this process, but that will be there. Great. I think I've covered everything that we wanted to cover in terms of FXCAD 2022. Any last final questions or final words?
Well, come on, everyone. If you got one last question, now's the time. But just reminding everyone, like Amanda said, July 6th, we'll be shipping this out.
Mhm.
And it will, if you want to get a 30-day trial of it, you're welcome to. And if you want to upgrade to it, that'll be when we'll be able to start processing the orders. And just keep the ideas coming. Gosh, can't think of anything else. Oh my gosh, look at that. Does your screen, it's 83 degrees right now for you already?
Yeah, guys, it was 73 when we started
Yeah,
testing our voices this morning, and it was
yikes.
43 about an hour before that. So it's going up over here.
It's going. Well, I think that's a sign that we need to wrap things up. So thanks everyone for attending and have a great weekend.
Thanks, guys. Bye.